Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Greetings and welcome back. Thanks for joining us again for this episode of Faith in Your Recovery. I always get excited when we get to bring you a new story, new details, new battles, new victories. And we've got that for you today all wrapped up in it. Most probably going to be a two-parter, so don't leave us too soon today. Hang in and hang on, and we'll share with you as much as we can. Our guest today comes to us from the major metropolis of Caruthersville, Indiana. That's south of Indianapolis, about, I'm going to guess, 75 miles, give or take a little bit, just off of 65. His name, Kyle. Welcome, Kyle McIntosh.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you after reading your bio and different things on you off the internet. Of course, it's always got us trailed and knows who we are, what we're about, almost where we are, okay?
Yeah.
So we're thrilled to have you here and get to hear your story. You grew up in the Indianapolis area, yes?
Yes, yeah. I was born and raised in Indy. Lived there for a majority, I would say, up into my teenage years, and then moved back in probably my 20s.
Okay, so where did you go to from Indianapolis?
So I originally got sent down to southern Indiana, Jackson County, but more the northern part of Jackson County, kind of towards Nashville area almost, which is in Brown County, but it's right down the road.
Love the Nashville area.
Yeah, it's beautiful. My mom used to call it God's country because it was stunning everywhere you went. But coming from the city to that was a whole different.
That had to be culture shock.
Oh, yeah. And I think that was kind of the judge's idea was we're going to just put him in a complete different mind zone, complete different surroundings, you know. And it was kind of, I think that was part of the punishment a little bit too, you know. If he doesn't have anything to get in trouble with, maybe that'll be the solution, right?
We'll see if that worked here in a few minutes with some of our questions and your answers. What was it that got you sent to southern Indiana, to that Nashville vicinity?
So graffiti. Graffiti was my crime. I kept repeating over and over as habitual. So the judge got tired of me and said, you know what? You're going south.
So what was it about graffiti that got you hooked?
There's really two things. One, I just love art. I've always loved bright colors as, just anything that really stood out to me. But one thing that really stood out is my grandmother was driving down 465 and she had mentioned something one day. She said she looked up at this really tall building. Probably, I don't know, I was a little kid, so maybe it seemed taller than it was, but it was probably at least 4 or 5 stories high, and says, look at that beautiful artwork. If they would just take that talent and put it towards something good, man, they're really talented. They deserve to be noticed, you know. And I remember just thinking, I always wanted to be the apple of my grandma's eye, right? I always wanted to be that grandson that she was proud of. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to draw that. So I was obsessed. At 8 years old, I started drawing graffiti.
So was it graffiti that was on that wall? Was that the artwork?
Yeah. It was graffiti on the outside, like the top of the building. And she was kind of amazed, like how they was able to go over the side of the building and reach it. And now that I think about it, that was pretty amazing. But I don't know, she was just more amazed by the artwork. And that was really the first time I'd ever heard anybody say, look at that beautiful artwork when they were talking about graffiti. Usually it's the opposite. Usually it's like, oh, that's unsightly, you know.
I have always been one, so I have no artistic skills, number one, but I know what kind of art I like, and graffiti's one of the types.
Nice.
You know, you pull up and there goes 99 cars on the train and you see the graffiti. And I'm just amazed at it. It relaxes me waiting for the train to get by.
And the sacrifice that those artists actually make is really remarkable too. Like, especially the really detailed stuff. They'll never see that artwork again, more than likely. Once it leaves that train yard, they'll never see it again.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really more for just doing the art than it is anything.
What is, I'm not sure how to ask this. What kind of graffiti art are you most about?
Ooh, so I loved all the different styles of graffiti art, but what I really liked was the ones that almost had a realistic like faces on them, like portraits or even cartoons, kind of more artwork, and not that graffiti isn't art, but more of characters and stuff like that involved in them. So
Yeah. So how long were you at that during that stage in your life?
ooh, yeah. So I started drawing it at 8, and then I was obsessed with it just every day in class. I was just drawing my name over and over. And then about a year after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to grab this spray can and I'm going to hit this brick wall over here and see what I can do with it. I thought it'd be so much easier than what it was. And I'm kind of glad it wasn't, I guess, because I liked the challenge and I still like challenges. So that to me is what kept me going with graffiti. So,
Is it art today that keeps you going?
ooh, very much so. Art is my language. It's how I communicate with people, but it's also how I deal with my own problems and my own struggles in life. And sometimes it's not even about doing it in front of other people. It's just me and a sketch pad.
Having to release it.
That's right.
If I was to see X amount of pieces of your art, would I be able to read between the lines and see where you're at in your life at that point?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. And I kind of wish I still had some of my art from the early years just to kind of see the growth and see where I was at mentally and spiritually in my life at that time, because it definitely changed over the years.
In the beginning, would you say your art was dark?
Oh, yeah.
Expressing, depression and
Yeah.
pain.
And to be 100% honest with you, I still have moments where I create art that is darker, that's not really anything like super bad. Just it's the colors are darker, the format's different, and those are the times where I know that I'm kind of in my own head, and even though every once in a while my wife will see me drawing something like that, she'll be like, oh, he's drawing that weird stuff again,
It's incredible to have that skill. Would you call it a gift from God, your art from the get-go, even to today?
I definitely do. Even before I knew who God was or knew a relationship with God, I look back on it now and I definitely think that if God wouldn't have given me this talent, I don't know if I would be here today. I don't know if I would even be alive today. Art has saved me.
You would have found another way to express yourself, and it may not have been a safe way.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you correct me anytime I'm wrong.
That's 100%.
All right. I know as a young person, as a kid, you struggled with mental illness, addiction, instability, institutions, and you said unseen battles. Before we get to those unseen battles, go ahead and elaborate a little on these other things that brought you such pain and chaos.
So I really knew, like, from a young kid. I mean, I remember, like, I don't know how old you are when you're in preschool, but probably preschool age, I remember really struggling with socializing with other kids. I always felt really like the oddball of all of them. While the other kids were out playing tag and running around, I just didn't really feel like that was fun to me. To me, what felt fun was to take a piece of paper and draw. But I think a lot of that was because when I was drawing, when I was creating art or even coloring, it was an escape from my life. and what was going on around me at the time. I remember at a young age as a kid, I was in and out of the court system a lot because my parents were divorced. So I felt like it was every other weekend we were sitting in a courtroom or something like that, and just over custody battle or something. And I just felt like really lost and confused as a kid. I never felt like I fit in anywhere I was. It didn't matter if I was at home or at school or anywhere.
You used the phrase that you had spent some time in institutions.
Yes.
What do you see now as you look back being the cause of that? And what was the experience for you?
Yeah. So I remember probably about, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old, I started to really feel this. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but I started to really feel this sadness a lot. Like I felt like everywhere I went, there was this black cloud that just kind of hovered over me. And I always felt like to be honest, I really felt like a failure to everybody around me. I was horrible in grades. I wasn't really good at school at all. And I was kind of, how do you say it? I was kind of defiant towards authority. I didn't love authority. So it was good. And that was the big part of it, was just trying to find myself. And a lot of times the depression was the worst part.
We're going to go back to that moment, but one of our listeners has a question. Eric, let us know what that question is, please.
Yeah, this question is from Heather Hendricks. Kyle, what is your greatest accomplishment so far in life?
Ooh,
that's jumping ahead, but we're going to take that. I like it.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Heather. My greatest accomplishment in my life would definitely be my kids.
How many?
I have 4 kids.
How old?
16, 14, 12, and 4 years old.
How are they doing as far as adjusting to life? You had your struggles. Are you seeing them? We all, every child has a struggle, but some hits harder than others.
I will say they are doing a lot better at it than I did. A lot more positive than I ever tried to do. And especially, my teenagers, they're the ones that are kind of going through those life experiences.
Oh, that's tough regardless of circumstances.
And that's kind of where my life started doing its own little twists and turns for the most part. It was probably, my youngest son, he's 12 years old. So probably around that time, like I was saying earlier, is when I started to really feel that sadness a lot, And I just thought everybody felt like that. I didn't think that was abnormal, And then it just started getting worse and worse to where, as a young kid, I was contemplating taking my own life on a regular basis. So,
what did being institutionalized do for you, or what kind of extra luggage did it put on you?
Ooh, yeah, I think it did put some negative effect. I will say that, because as a kid, I was confused more than anything. I was like, what? Am I crazy? Am I doing something wrong? I almost felt like feeling that sadness was a major problem, right? Like it was like you're doing something bad. Like I was getting punished almost. But also it was humbling, and it was understanding of other people, because once I ended up in the first institution that I was at, I was probably about 13, 14 years old, and I was really having a lot of suicidal thoughts. So the school said, hey, he needs help. And I got put in there, and it was in there for a while. But in that amount of time that I was in there, I met other kids roughly the same age as me that were dealing with way crazier stuff than what I was. What I mean by crazy is they really had a really rough life, way, way worse than what I was going through. And it kind of humbled me. It kind of made me think like, maybe I'm not doing so bad,
We all hunt for an identity. You found it in a group of individuals going through the same similar struggle at different levels, as you've said, but it gave you,
But it also made me want to care. It made me realize that other people have a lot of problems too, and I wasn't the only one. So then that made me kind of be more considerate of other people, even strangers. Like if I would have met those kids out on the street, they probably would have never told me those things. But they were still dealing with those problems just like I was. So that really made me think a lot about, there's other people that are struggling the same way, and I should probably just reserve my judgment before I jump on and say,
Kyle, as I listen to you here, I get the feeling you've got a lot of compassion, a lot of sensitivities for and toward others, and that's come as a result of your own experiences, learning how to deal with them, how to adjust, and if there are others. We've got another question here. Let's give it a shot. Eric?
Yeah, this one is from the famous Sean Harris. Did graffiti allow you to be more honest with God about your anger or sadness than a Sunday service does?
Ooh,
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's
I
actually
don't know where questions like that come
no,
from.
that is a great question.
Do.
So later on in life, it actually did, and early in life. So I will say, in all honesty, as a young kid doing graffiti in these abandoned warehouses and wherever I was, I didn't really know God at that time. I have heard of God, but I didn't know what that relationship with God meant. I never heard I could have a relationship with God. But I will say, when I was in those warehouses and I was alone and I had my sketch pad and I was drawing graffiti that was on the walls and then doing graffiti on the walls, I was at peace, even though I was in a chaotic situation. It was a lot of a danger around me. And if you think like anybody that has kids, I wouldn't let my kid go run around in an abandoned warehouse in the middle of Indianapolis, right? But my parents were hardworking, so they were gone a lot. So I was the one that was always just skipping out of the house to go paint some abandoned warehouse. But even though it was dark, it was dingy, it was dangerous, there was even needles and everything all over the ground, I just felt peace there. And I didn't technically know God then, but I know God knew me. And I knew that was my heaven. And he was protecting me from all the dangers that were certainly around me. But later on in life, I did use it in a way that God, or should I say, I didn't use it. God used it in a way that I would have never dreamed of.
So, Kyle, over the years, have you been a leader or a follower?
Ooh, that is that's a tricky question, because I like to think of myself as a follower, because I say that because I like learning from other people. I like to see what they're going through, and I like to be the person that kind of sits back a little bit and says, okay, I know not to do that, or I know I need to do better at that, right? Because they're doing really good. Now, I've been given the title leader, and that's a very lofty title to own to. It's a lot to carry on your shoulders, but I would consider myself more of a follower than a leader.
Okay. Your friends, they would consider you, it sounds like, a leader.
Yes. I have a lot of people that will say that I'm a leader. So.
How? What kind of leadership, do you provide?
So a lot of people, when I hear the word leader and they're talking with me or about me, they usually bring up like community leadership and improving the problems in our community, not just myself, but just kind of being that person that's on the front of the line that says, you know what, this is a problem. We need to address it. How do we address it? And then usually there's other people that will come along with those talents or needs, whatever they have, and says, you know what, I can help with that. I've been thinking about that for years, but I didn't want to be the person that said it. I didn't want to be the person, if it failed, I didn't want to be the guy that said, oh, that was a bad idea, where I'm like, I don't care. You can.
Do you think some of that comes from your past experiences?
Oh, yeah.
You know now as you look back what could have made you a better you, and now you're wanting to help find a way to provide that for others who are struggling?
Yes, I 100% think so, because I seen the neighborhood I grew up in was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of poverty, and some kids, the only meal they got was at school. they went home to a home that was just, it was a dope house. Usually it wasn't anything good happening there. And to be honest with you, just the neighborhood that I lived in, there wasn't a lot of hope there. And I, the neighborhood I live in now, the community I live in now, it's a beautiful little country town, but it has a lot of the same problems as I did in urban Indianapolis. There's poverty levels are insanely high. These kids come home to a lot of drug problems, a lot of abuse. And I feel like even not just kids, but adults as well, I don't want anybody to feel like they're the only person that's going through that, because I went through it too. Maybe not the same as that situation, but very similar.
Absolutely. I know there in Caruthersville, you've created give me the label for the wall that
yes,
it's kind of free paint.
Yes, the graffiti wall. So the free graffiti wall or free art wall is what you hear a lot of people
free
call
art
it.
wall. That's what I was hunting for.
Yes.
I don't want you to get into that too much now, but we're going to attack that after a bit, because I think that's an incredible example of what you're telling us about your leadership in providing options, investing in the community.
Yes.
Wow, I love the idea, but folks, we're just teasing before we go to pleasing. All right, we'll do that here after a while. Let's go back to this whole idea of the struggle and all that's going on. What was the lights on moment for you, Kyle? That situation, circumstance, words of wisdom, whatever it may have been, that you realized the way my life's headed, it's not good. I'm not saying you didn't know that before, but before you answer, we've got another question.
Yeah,
I'd
no
love
problem.
that
No
to
problem.
have this kind
I love
of
it.
audience participation. Go ahead, Eric.
This question is from Sherry. Your insightfulness is so impressive. Was there anyone in your life that was instrumental in bringing you to this point?
Wow, that is a fantastic question, Sherry. I've had several people actually that has came along in my life that really just made such an impact as far as what way I was going to go. My wife and her family were probably the biggest people in my life that changed the whole course, and I'll get into that later. But another person would probably, two people would be my brother Brandon, that's no longer with us now, and then my good friend Sean Malone, which I've known him for about 20 plus years, and he kind of took me under his wing when no one else could even look my way.
So your brother, was he older or younger?
Yes, he was older than me.
Okay, we'll hear that story after a while, sure. That's interesting she'd ask that, because my next question was very similar, wanting to know the positive influences that have helped create the Sean of today. But let's go back to that lights on moment and describe and define that the best we can.
So the lights on moment actually happened in my early 20s, probably about 16 years ago.
Kyle, how old are you now?
30,
Mid-30s?
39.
Okay,
yeah.
Late 30s, all right.
Yeah. So it's actually a long bit of a story, but I'll tell you what happened though, to kind of narrow it down a little bit for you, is the moment that I had that lights on moment, my life wasn't actually as bad as it had been. It was actually mediocre. I thought at the time was pretty good. Now I look back and it wasn't that great, but it was better than it had been in probably many, many years. And I remember thinking, like, I kind of don't want this to end. I kind of like this good feeling, you know.
You liked where you were at that time.
And I was still using every day. I was still, really in the drug game, but I was feeling better than I had been because I had positive influences around me. And I remember thinking, if I don't straighten myself up, I'm gonna lose everything again. I'm gonna be like a dog chasing his tail, and I'm not gonna get anywhere. I'm just gonna lose everything. So what happened was I actually was alone at the house, and I was just kind of just bored, I guess you'd say. And I remember thinking, my wife, and she wasn't my wife at the time, but my girlfriend at the time and her family are always talking about God. But they weren't just talking about God like God was way up here and you're way down here, which that's the definition that I've always received, I felt like. But they were talking about God like it was their neighbor, like they were out shoveling a sidewalk, you know what I mean? Like they were just besties. And they would even refer to him as like Papa and stuff like that. And I just thought, how crazy is that? But I was sitting there in this room thinking to myself, if their relationship is that beautiful and they're so happy that they seem like they've got it together, I want that. I want what they have. And I thought to myself, I've tried everything to be happy. I've tried everything from money to cars to the good jobs, the girlfriends, the drugs, the alcohol. And here I am questioning why I'm not as happy as they are, right? And I've even attempted to take my own life to find happiness, which sounds crazy, but that's where I was mentally at one point. But those things almost killed me more than once. I almost died from trying to find happiness. And this wasn't going to kill me. Giving my life over to God and believing him as my savior was not going to kill me. If anything, if it didn't work, it just didn't work, right? I'd go on with my day. So that's when I said my first earnest prayer in my life. I was about probably 22, 23 years old. And I just asked God, I said, God, if you can help me with anything, help me with addiction, because whether it's me or somebody else, it has completely ruined my life. And I don't want to go, I don't want to keep doing this, and I can't keep doing this anymore. So if you're real, help me with this. And I remember I just, I said, hey man, and I believed it. I really did. I believed in what I was saying. It was from the heart. It was from the soul. But I also have always lived a very skeptical life, right? So I was like, I went to bed and I didn't think much about it after that. And so the next morning I woke up and I was running late. My alarm clock was off. It was just, I think the power had reset or something overnight. And I never run late. I'm always early to everything. So I was like, what's going on? Right. So I just get my clothes on and go straight out the door. That was I had to get there. So that day I stayed busy the entire day. I'm talking the whole day. There wasn't a minute that I wasn't busy, which was not common for me at the time. I was always had way too much time, which was probably part of my problem. But that night I get home and I just crash, right? I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. I can't even think about nothing. So then the next morning, my alarm clock doesn't go off again. This time, I don't even know why. It just wouldn't go off. I was running a few minutes behind. I run out the door again, and I'm busy the whole day. Well, a buddy asked me, he said, hey, is there any way you could help me move my mom's stuff in? So I helped him move some stuff, and I didn't get home till really late, right? So I crash as soon as I get home. The next morning, I wake up. I go straight downstairs. I wake up early this time, so I set like 2 alarms. But I woke up about 30 minutes earlier than I was supposed to. And I go straight downstairs, and my routine was I would get up every morning, and I would drink about a 40 ounce of beer, and I would pop a few pills, and that's how I'd start my day. I'd do that before I did anything, before I brushed my teeth, before I took a shower or anything. And I walked downstairs. I opened the refrigerator door. I grabbed that 40 ounce beer, and I had a metal trash can. If you hit it with your foot and it opens the lid, and the trash can was empty. And I dropped this 40 ounce in the bottom of this trash can. And that was my light bulb moment. That was the moment where it was like, ding. I just realized that the last 2 days I had been clean. I didn't have anything. I wasn't using anything at all at that time for the last 2 days. Now, to be 100% honest with you, is because I was busy nonstop, which was very rare for me at the time. But I think God knew what he had to do, right? So I remember I looked up, and it says in the word not to question the Lord, but I looked up and I said, God, if you can do that, what else can you do with my life? Because if you can do that, I'm here and I'm willing, and you do whatever you want with me. And that's the point where I love to say that it was a beautiful bed of flowers after that. That was not.
Not the case.
No, it got really hard. I always say that giving my life to God was kind of like being in an intersection doing about 50 miles per hour going through an intersection, and then a Mack truck just hit me, right? It was just, I was spinning all the way around, every direction. This was the difference. I had somebody on my side this time.
Amen. You know, you made a comment there, and I'm not going to debate, but I have a little different feelings than a lot of people. You say it talks about not questioning God, but by the same token, Christ on the cross said what? My God, why
Yes.
have you forsaken me?
Yes.
Now, God is not required to answer our questions.
Right.
I think his shoulders are big enough to take any question we have for him.
Exactly.
And it's not necessarily out of faith that we're asking the question. It's our own human curiosity that he put in us.
Right.
And like I said, if he wants to answer it, he will. And if he doesn't, you're going to have to deal with that.
That's right.
But I, for one, believe it's okay.
Yeah.
And as you were speaking back there and sharing with that lights on time, it's incredible that when we say, God, if you're
Yeah.
God, if you're real,
Yeah.
I have yet to have anybody seated where you are out of 220 episodes say, he didn't prove it to me.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
go ahead, ask him if he's real.
Oh, he'll
And
prove
then
it.
he'll prove it. You may not like the way he'll prove it, and
Exactly,
it may not be what you
Yeah.
wanted.
It's not going to be all, roses. It's,
You know, I like to say puppies and rainbows.
That's
okay,
right, yeah.
It's not going to always fit that,
Exactly.
but he's as real as anything you have
That's
ever
right.
encountered. And I invite you to encounter him through that question. And just move forward then and know he can take your other questions. So, yeah, what is it, Kyle? Because we're going to break right into another episode here in a moment, but we kind of want to use this one for the struggles, and we want to share your victories. We've been talking about the valleys. We want to talk about your redemption and your recovery. What is it from this part of the life before the change comes, before the new Kyle is created, that you want us to know?
Oh yeah. So, before I found my relationship with God, I was a mess. I was just a mental mess. I was in and out of mental institutions because I was diagnosed manic depressant, and I was having some really bad manic episodes in my early 20s, and I didn't care about my own life, and if you don't care about your own life, you really don't care about anybody else's. And I was just dangerous. I was dangerous to myself, and I was dangerous to others. And it wasn't just, if I was mad at my boss or whatever, it was people that really cared for me and really adored me. I just didn't want anything to do with it. I pushed them away. I would do everything I could to destroy those relationships on purpose, because I felt like I didn't deserve those.
Self-sabotage.
Oh, yeah. I was a king of it.
Yeah. I want to hear in this next episode about this wife of yours.
Yes.
I am impressed by
She
her.
is
Never met her,
strong.
never seen her. You only know what you've shared with us.
Yeah.
I want to get to know her better because she must be a warrior for Christ.
She is definitely a warrior.
Just put there for a reason.
That's right.
And
And I believe that.
obviously you're living today as a part of that reason.
I do. I believe that meeting her was part of God's plan. I believe that if I wouldn't have met her, I don't know if I would even be here today. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything else you want to say at this point before we kind of just change gears here a little bit?
You go ahead.
All right. Well, folks, that's our first episode. That's the battle. we're going to go right straight into the victory here. We're going to hear the redemption story. Kyle McIntosh from Caruthersville has shared with us. He's got more to say about life, family, home, recovery, and Jesus, I'm sure. And we want to get to that. So here we go. Kyle, as we get into this segment, what changes did you see happening in your life, in your level of peace, your level of comfort, your level of understanding, your level of acceptance, your level of love of self? As you said earlier, if you don't love yourself, you can't love others. We want to hear about that transformation.
So it really was a transformation in so many ways in my life, so many parts of my life. Like I said, when I gave my life to God and decided that he was going to be my Lord and Savior, it was like getting hit in an intersection. It was like getting T-boned. And I say that, and some people kind of give me the eyebrow, like, oh, that sounds bad. But not necessarily. It was because my life was already spinning out of direction, kind of, right? But when I finally landed, I felt like God was saying, you know what? You told me to do whatever I wanted with you. And that's where I messed up, right? But anyways, and he did. So about a year prior to me giving my life to God, and my life was in total chaos, probably at my worst point in my life, I was super social anxiety to the point it was debilitating. I couldn't even go into a grocery store. I couldn't go into a drive-through. Couldn't do any of it because I would have panic attacks really, really bad. And it really, really messed up my life at that point. But after I gave my life to God, I would say it was within a couple months, maybe, I had met another person that worked in the Christian music circuit, and he saw me doing a mural for a church. It was graffiti. And he said, hey, I've got an idea. And he asked me about my story, about my testimony. And I said, yeah, I'm a believer, and then I kind of told him what had happened, what I shared with you guys earlier. And he said, you know what? I think you need to share your testimony. And I want you to share it with these groups of people. I go and DJ music for Christian music bands. And I want you to get up and paint and give your testimony if you feel led to do that. I want you to pray about it. So I did. I prayed about it, and I thought, well, that sounds crazy, But I was thinking, 5-10 people, little Baptist church in the middle of nowhere, right? I didn't know the Christian music industry was in. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know there was a whole industry there, right? So, anyways, we go to I think it was our first show, and it was 30,000 something people at this event. And I was like, so what tent are we in? He's like, oh no, we're on the stage over here. Like, what are you talking about?
Where was this, Kyle?
This was at Bushnell, Illinois, at trying to remember the name of the festival now. I don't think it's no longer running. They used to call it the Woodstock of Christian Music Festivals.
Oh, cool.
Because it was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was huge. It was like a few 100-acre farm. But anyways, we get on stage, and I start painting. He starts doing his music.
You're literally painting.
Yeah,
You're not
I was
painting with
like,
words, but with brush.
Like on canvas and spray painting. And then they took a little break, and then I gave my testimony and what happened in my life and coming from Indianapolis and so forth. And I remember going on stage just thinking, nobody wants to hear my testimony. Why do they care about me, right? And I just thought, whatever, so I'll just do this and get it over with. And I really did. I had kind of a negative attitude towards it because I was like, I don't really want to do this. This is not what I thought it was. I thought we'd do it in 5 people, right? So anyways, I do it, and I get off stage. I'm only up there for 10 minutes or so, but I get off stage, and he says, all right, cool. I said, all right, well, I'm going to head back to the tent, and he's like, oh no, you gotta go over here to the meet and greet part. I said, meet and greet? Well, no, I'm not in the band. This is one of the managers. He said, well, you got to do the meet and greet. I was like, I'm not in the band. He said, no, if you're on stage, you still have to do the meet and greet. Okay, right. And I didn't want to be disrespectful. I was like, all right, whatever, I'll go to this tent, but nobody's going to come over to me. Like the Newsboys was playing, stuff like that.
So these are not little names.
Oh, no, they were big deal. They were big bands. And
Let
I didn't know who they were.
Remind people for fear they've forgotten. You started this by talking about your anxiety issues, and here you are on stage or near on stage with
But
the newsboys in front of
you know what's very interesting about that, though, is when I was on stage, I never really had stage fright. Even though I was really anxious, it was more being one-on-one with a person that was just fearful for me.
You could get lost in a crowd easier than you can two or three people.
Exactly. So I go to this meet and greet. This is my first meet and greet ever. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm in this little corner. No one's even going to care about me. Thankfully, right? I won't have to do anything. I'll get this over with and I'll go to sleep. And I go there and there's a whole line all the way around the block for this meet and greet because the newsboys and all of them are playing, right? And then there's a couple of lines for the other bands that were opening and stuff like that. And then where our table was, there was probably about, 20 people in line. And I'm like, what is going on? They must get this confused. Like, they must thought this was one of the bands. Well, anyways, I tell you what, though, what happened was I had a few people that came up to me in that line that night that told me their story. And they were younger. They're probably teenagers or early adults, but they were telling me their story about dealing with self-harm and suicide and depression and all that, and losing family members to that kind of stuff. And, oh man, you talk about humbling. It just took me like I felt like all the problems that I'd carried my whole life were nothing compared to them. You know what I mean? And they were strong. And then they were telling me that I was an inspiration. Like what? That doesn't make any sense.
You had opened the door for them to be able to say, I've been there.
Yes.
I've done that. I've got those scars here. Let me show it to you. Finally, they saw someone who got it.
Yes. And, to be honest with you, when I left that meet and greet that night, I talked to God for probably an hour and a half after that. God, what are you doing? Why am I here? These people, they know more than I do. I'm just trying to figure out my own feelings right now. And I look back on those days now, and those were the best part of the whole thing, was meeting the people afterwards, not because they came to meet me. That was not at all. It was hearing their testimonies and hearing the struggles that they went through, because you want to talk about, I remember one time getting mad because my hotel room didn't have a hot shower. The shower wasn't hot for some reason. And I was really upset about that, And then later on that night, we go to this show, and this young lady's talking about how she's battling cancer, and she's on the last stage of cancer, and she knows she's going to pass away in just a couple months. As she's telling me that, she has a smile from ear to ear. She is filled with the Holy Spirit. She loved God so much, and she was glorifying God, knowing that she was on her deathbed. You want to talk about humbling. I was complaining about my shower not being warm that morning,
Well, I want to go back and ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
You shared that on-stage experience. Do you recall what the picture was that you were painting?
I do. It was a city skyline with Jesus with the crown of thorns. And I don't remember what the wording was that I put on it, but it started out with just a bunch of blotches of paint, and then it turned into the face of Jesus on it. So,
wow. I'd like to see a video of that, okay? Yeah. I'm sure it's in your head and you can see it playing, but...
I look back on it like, oh, that was a horrible painting. I could have done so much better. But it really wasn't about the painting, It was about the testimony and the meaning.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. And I never preached a sermon in 35 years that I didn't think next week's should be and could be better.
Right.
That doesn't mean it was.
Yes.
But exactly. I knew there was room for improvement because there's no limit with God.
Well, I remember even thinking every time I stood on stage and gave my testimony, I remember thinking, like, God, why am I doing this? Like, no one out here cares about me. They don't know me. They're not going to identify with me. And then, right after the show, I would meet several of those people that were in the audience, and they would share how it inspired them. And I, so I did feel like God was using me in those capacities.
Sure. Okay, Kyle, let's go back home for a little bit to Caruthersville, okay? Let's say I'm walking down the street and I think you said it's basically a one light town, meaning
Yeah.
it's very small.
Yeah.
I'm there at that corner, and here comes a group of individuals, basically your age, a little older, a little younger, doesn't matter. And I say, tell me, do you know Kyle? And, you know, they're going to go, which Kyle? Probably,
Right, yeah.
okay? And I'm going to go the artist, Kyle McIntosh. Then, what are they going to say? What do you hope they would say, Kyle?
Oh, yeah. So I would hope they would say that he does a lot of good in our community, and he really tries to reach out and help those that are in need. And hopefully they say that they like my artwork. So.
Okay, let's go ahead. What is it that you do accomplish in your community or try to?
Yeah.
How do you spend yourself in service? What are some of the projects? I know you have a tattoo shop, yes?
Yeah.
And the name of that was like Beauty from Ashes?
Yep. Beauty from Ashes Tattoo. Yeah. And that came about was when I was actually working at a factory at the time, or a warehouse at the time. And I just felt like God really nudging me, you know, those moments where you feel like God's poking you, like, hey, wake up, you know. And I remember thinking of this crazy idea, how I wanted to get back into tattooing, but I just didn't feel right.
So you had been doing tattooing prior
I'd been
to
tattooing
this.
prior, but the industry is pretty dark. It's got a lot of bad stuff in it, and I didn't feel comfortable being in the walk of the Lord and doing the things.
Convicted to step back.
To go back into the industry, because there was a lot of drugs, there's a lot of crime, and not everywhere, but at the places that I was, there was. And I was just like, man, I don't want to put myself at risk, you know? And then I remember